Welcome to Black Brilliance. My name is Andrew Weaver. I am the founder of Black Brilliance on the B side and also Black Dollar Fund. Today we're going to have the very first podcast. This one's with a brilliant man named Mark Eckhardt. He's the leader of Common and also just started something called 1 Million Truths. He's the brilliance of the future, but we're also going to do something that's a little different than any podcast that I've seen. We're gonna discuss someone black and brilliant from the past, and this is going to be a Black brilliant sister. So her name is Bessie Blount Griffin. We're going to let that play out, and then we'll discuss on the other side. This Black brilliant sister's name is Bessie Blount Griffin. She was born on November 24th in 1914 in Hickory, Virginia, which is now called Chesapeake. In the 6th grade, she had to discontinue her education, but would later earn her GED after her family moved to New Jersey because the area she lived in only went up to the 6th grade for people of color. She studied nursing at the Community Kinney Memorial Hospital in Newark, and while she was there, she developed a passion in the field of physical therapy. During World War II, there was an influx of wounded soldiers in need of physical therapy, and Betsy came to their aid. She invented a product to give paraplegics their dignity back. On April 24, 1951, Betsy received her patent for the portable receptacle support, which allowed paraplegics to feed themselves. Bessie Blount Griffin, we see you and we thank you, sister. Just heard of Bessie Blount Griffin, and the sister was amazing. One of the things I learned from the past few months or so since George Floyd is how great and brilliant Black people have been, even though society and history hasn't really told us all that. To some degree, we're always told, it's like we just passed. The reason why I call this is on the B side is because of there's always been Black people who've done things great that we talked to or that we found out about in school, but those are the same ones that we always find about. Those are the people on the A side, which I say, just like on the record, on the B side is the ones we never heard of, that did just as great things as anybody else. And this lady, among with other beautiful men and women who have done some of the greatest things that we couldn't live without today. Now, this is a 1-minute clip. We'll have one on YouTube that'll be longer, that'll extend. But this young lady did some of the most amazing things back in her time. She actually went to school, to nursing school, and became a physical therapist. And not only did she create this thing for people to get their dignity back, as far as like paraplegics and stuff like that from World War II, she invented a few other things that actually helped people along the way, and it's an amazing thing. What did you think when you heard about it? Just this 1-minute clip, but what did you think about her and her accomplishment?
Immediately was, okay, here we go again. Here's another story about a person that has made a significant contribution to people with real needs that we've never heard about and probably would never hear about, Andrew, if you hadn't, discovered her. I mean, but isn't that our history? There's one part of our history that seems to remain in the foreground, and that's in many ways the very painful and tragic part of our history. I think that there's reasons for that, and so much of the goodness and the brilliance, to use your word, and the contributions have, I really think, intentionally been ignored and pushed to the background. I mean, there's obviously a long history, an answer or an explanation to what I just said, but maybe that's another podcast.
Oh yeah, definitely. So we're gonna dive right into yourself. If you can give us an introduction of who you are, what you do, what drives you, what's your your passion, and what's your purpose? What are you here for that you know of?
Okay, sure. So I'm Mark Eckhardt, as you've already shared, Drew. I'm the CEO of Common. Common is a creative community and accelerator for socially responsible businesses, projects, and ideas. So every day I wake up in the morning and I get to work with people like yourself, part of Common, an important part of Common. And together we are building companies and building platforms and projects and initiatives that are designed to address some of the world's most seemingly intractable problems, from social justice, economic disparity, climate change, so on and so forth. We're in 21 countries. Our members are working in 27 different industries. Our members range in size from publicly traded corporations, all the way across the board to solo individuals who have an idea that they'd like support validating and bringing to market. So it's incredibly rich. My background, I was born in New York in 1969. I was part of the second generation of trans, quote unquote, transracial adoption. So I was adopted into a white family. And the rest is history. My family pretty much are all educators, which was wonderful to be part of and immersed in. And in the late 70s, we moved to Southern California, and I grew up in a little town called Claremont, which is an hour east of Los Angeles, and a little hippie town set up against the mountains. And so it was full of art, culture, and academia. There's, several small little powerhouse private colleges in Claremont. So we had, the influence and the presence of, big thinking and big ideas and intellectual endeavors constantly around us as I grew up.
You said you grew up in this family. Now, when was it the first time that you recognized? Because we see this in something that we're going to introduce in a little bit about some new thing that you're doing, but when did you recognize that you were different than the rest of the people around you? Because it seems, I'm not sure, I'm guessing that you didn't have that much of the Black experience so much growing up until a certain point, right?
Yeah, that's very true. I had zero of the Black experience growing up. And it wasn't until, latter years of high school and college that I was, I pursued it, I wanted it, I needed it. The fact that I'm Black and was adopted into a white family, it was always discussed. It was always embraced, from the beginning. My parents were part of a group of aspiring or desiring parents who were committed to ensuring that every child had a loving family and home. And so they were very intentional in their effort and commitment to adopting me, or somebody who looked like me. And that brought attention immediately. So they were asked to be guests on the Joe Garagiola show, for anybody who remembers Joe Garagiola, and invited to speak about being white parents adopting a Black child, in a number of different places in a number of different ways. So it's always been, right there out in the open. So I always knew that I was Black. I didn't start to feel the implications of being Black out in the world until high school and college, and certainly up and into my adulthood and my professional career. And boy, it caught up with me.
Yeah, because I would think that that you're Black. That's one thing, knowing the difference between the color, but the difference between societal responses to it. Because you're in a loving family of people who look white, that treat you're just like another human being. But when you get outside that bubble, then you start to realize, like, whoa, something's up here. There's something. Because even being Black myself, it didn't have to be that you had white or Black parents. It's like being in a Black family, I knew that I was Black, but not until I got into a certain area that was almost all white that I realized, like, wow, this Black thing is something different. And this is at a young age, but still, it happened to that point. We're gonna go a little bit into some of your things that you've done, man. It's amazing, because I was amazed to hear that you were a Buddhist priest. Now, it's right, it's a Buddhist priest, correct?
Yeah, Zen Buddhist priest, yep.
Zen Buddhist priest. Now, for something like that, like, it shocked me, because, again, myself, I know little to nothing about it. Did a little research, but what brought you to Zen, being a Zen Buddhist priest? I heard a little bit I read a little bit of story online, but I'd love for you to share it.
Of course. There's a number of factors or things that contributed to that choice. The main thing, though, is I experienced myself slipping. I was very fortunate in that I had tremendous opportunities to do incredible things early on in my career that were very fulfilling. And I racked up a track record of producing pretty big results. And then in my early 20s, I just realized that it was getting harder and harder for me to produce what had been very natural. And I couldn't understand why I had gone from ease and fluidity into struggle and strife. Add in there a couple toxic, horrible, dysfunctional relationships, and that only accelerated my descent, my crash. But I was led to Buddhism because I was desperately seeking answers. I couldn't understand why, for example, I had really accelerated as an up and coming young musician and drummer and played with huge artists and had incredible opportunities. I couldn't understand why that seemed to be fading away. I couldn't understand why my relationships were going south, and so on and so forth. And I went to therapy. I read a ton of books, did workshops. There's a hilarious story about a series of 13 colonics that somebody convinced me I needed to do. And I mean, there's a horrible story about a shrimp, but that's for another podcast. And none of it stuck, and none of it penetrated what I was going through at enough depth for me to reconnect to what I could feel and I knew was there, but wasn't able to articulate, express, or exercise. And so after sharing my pathetic story to a young man who I happened to meet at a gym I was working at, Scott, his name is Scott Zagarino, he just said, you know what? I'm training to be a Zen Buddhist priest. I'm trained over at the Santa Monica Zen Center. It's 2 blocks from here, or whatever it was. We're having an introduction on Saturday. Come on down. And so I did. It was a half-a-day workshop. And the moment that I walked in the door and I saw the other priests there who were setting things up and getting ready for the day, I knew that I was supposed to be there and that was the path for me to take. So literally from the minute I walked in the door, I made a commitment to being a priest. The reason why I did that, or was compelled or moved to do that, is because there was something about the room and those people that felt very familiar to me. They exuded mastery. They exuded awareness. They exuded compassion and skill and goodness. And those felt very, very similar, from being a competitive athlete and training to spending thousands upon thousands of hours alone in a practice room working to become a master at drums and music. It all made sense. And then throughout the course of that 6-hour workshop, I learned that there is a very specific curriculum that you could opt in on that would help me discover and land on the answers that I needed to put myself back together. And 15 years later, I'm a Zen priest.
You think about different language, religions and so forth. You think of priest being someone who can marry someone, someone who can do certain. What are the things that Buddhist priests do?
I can marry people and do all the things that priests and other religions and faiths do. But the fundamental commitment is to end needless suffering for yourself and out in the world. And the curriculum is built around helping people have deep insight into human nature and reality. And the assumption is that through doing so, with some support and guidance, that you can come to understand your nature. And through understanding your nature, you restore choice or freedom in your life. And it's a very simplified version. And whether it's the precepts, which are basically equivalent to the commandments, there's this entire body of work that extends thousands of years back that are there to prompt insight, but also to help you navigate and serve as kind of guidelines that you're constantly kind of swinging back and forth, just kind of as you navigate. It's not necessarily a straight line, life experiences happens. And so it's about constant calibration, using the training, using the body of work and all that kind of stuff. I will say that Zen Buddhist training was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I mean, I would wake up at 4 a.m. I would be on my mat and cushion by 4:30 or 5 a.m. I was there or training in some form or capacity, or engaged in the work that needed to be done for the Zen Center. 35 hours a week and also expected to maintain a career in health and well-being and financial integrity and integrity in relationships. And so all that was expected of me while I was constantly immersed in this environment and this structure and system that is poking you, getting you to wake up, getting you to own, to see, to address the parts of your character that aren't so great, that lead to your suffering, but also the suffering others through deeds and acts that just aren't cool. And it was all, I committed to that as hard as it was, because fundamentally deep down inside, I knew why I was here and why I'm here on earth as a human being, and I knew my potential. And as bad as life has ever gotten, or as hard as anything has ever gotten, for whatever reason, I've been able to maintain awareness and some connection. Sometimes it was very faint, very quiet. You have to listen carefully to find it, to connect to it, but that has never left me. And that's how I've gotten through training and everything else that I've done in life.
I think a lot of us need time to kind of figure out who we are, and I would guess you do a lot of a time in silence, kind of paying attention to just thinking about your life and trying. That's one thing also about Buddhists, that even that with different other cultures is meditating, and finding that time to quiet your mind. And I've never been able to do that my whole life, man. My mind's always working even when I'm asleep.
Figure out
That I know is true.
Find that peace.
Yeah, exactly, right. So I don't know, man. I've been trying to do it. Now I'm trying to learn how to do meditation, just simple for myself, because I do need to take time to kind of slow down a little bit. I'm always running around. But you also, what you mentioned about is, most people don't know how great this gentleman is he was a musician for so many years, professional musician. And it seems like you're good at dedicating yourself to something and becoming an expert at it to some degree. I mean, that's something that seems like you seek and have sought. And I would like to know a little bit more about your music career, man. I mean, I know you play drums for some big bands. If you have any stories to share, any aspiring artists out there who are doing drums or anything like that, anything you want to share with anyone like that?
I'll begin with, if you ask my mother, she'll tell you I was a drummer from the beginning. And to this day, she has the pots and pans to prove it, man. I'll never forget back in 2005, bringing my now wife, Melina, we've been together for 15 years, bringing Melina to meet my mother for the first time. And of course, moms, how they get, they're just like, oh, all right, let me tell you a story about, all that. And then all of a sudden out come the pans, and they're dented on, the pots and pans, they're dented on the bottom side. So according to my mother, I've been a drummer from the beginning.
You still had them, huh?
she still uses them. It's just like, Mom, I can buy you some new pots and pans. I mean, what's going on? Throughout elementary school and middle school and high school, I dabbled. I was in bands with friends, garage bands and things like that. But it wasn't until my first year in college, so I studied business in college, that I was introduced to Roy Burns. This is the man who ultimately became my teacher for many, many years. I was introduced to him by a guy by the name of Josh Freese, who currently plays for Sting, and just incredible drummer. He's had an insane career. He's one of the top drummers in the world. But Roy has a just incredible story. He grew up in Kansas City, and for whatever reason, the military band in the area used his street to practice. So they'd go marching up and down the street. Roy would come out of the house, sit on the curb, and watch the band go up and down. One day, the lead snare drummer of the marching band, the military band, walked over to Roy, handed over his sticks, leaned his drum over, and Roy proceeded to play all of the drum parts.
How old was he again?
8 years old.
8? Holy.
Picks Roy up by the collar, marches him to the front door, knocks on the front door of this house. Mother opens the door and the guy says, "Ma'am, you need to get this young boy here drum lessons." Fast forward 10 years goes by. Roy's now 18 years old, $300 in his pocket, moves to New York, and the first gig he lands is with Benny Goodman. and he takes over the drum seat, the drum throne from Gene Krupa.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
18?
18,
Holy.
first gig in New York, $300 in his pocket. He takes over the drum seat from Gene Krupa, there's Buddy Rich at that time, and then there was Gene. I mean, it doesn't get any bigger than that in terms of in the drum world. And from there, Woody Herman, Count Basie, Lionel Hampton, Ella Fitzgerald, NBC Orchestra, house drummer for the Monterey Jazz Festival, on and on and on and on and on.
Wow.
I mean, he's an icon in the drum world, and he just happened to have a gift for teaching. He was a master instructor. And so he took me, I forget how old I was, maybe 18 or 19 years old, raw talent. He took me from that to being a professional drummer working full-time in 3 years.
Wow. Is he still with us?
We lost him in, I believe it was 2018. Sad, but he gave me one of his last drum sets. I still have it. It's the only drum set that I've kept. It's a Gretsch drum set, beautiful make, red. I mean, just gorgeous. And it was the set I used for the majority of my career. I had many others that I used for depending on the situation, but that was the heart, the foundation of my playing.
Do you have those with you right now? That's the ones you haven't shipped to you?
Yeah. So let me give you a little more of a story, because it's actually pretty touching. Roy started an accessories company. They made drum heads and drumsticks. He had an incredible reputation throughout the entire industry. And because I was his student and because I was endorsed by his company, I was really fortunate. So fast forward to today, I'm needing to get my drums shipped to where I'm currently living. I reach out to Roy's old company, and I contact his business partner, Ron, who I know, and he was really supportive of me. And he's just like, let me make a call. So he calls this company and arranges to have these cases made. And when they hear about my relationship with Roy and all that kind of stuff, they're like, of course we're going to make these cases for Mark. So he keeps having an influence on me to this day.
He paid it forward. It's great to hear things like that happen in society, and especially for people of color. It's like you don't really get it paid forward a lot in your life. You don't get those types of opportunities that give you that, but you had the drive and the ability to be able to pull it off, and you're continually to pay it forward yourself with the way that you're teaching people in every area of your life. You mentioned Common, and that's a group for entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs who are doing great by others. Did you always have this passion to do great by others, or is this something that epiphany that happened later on in life?
When I was a young kid, I had a moment. I was playing in the park, laid down on the grass, and just was taking a moment to just be with the sky and the clouds. And as I was sitting there in the grass looking up into the sky, I was just overwhelmed with a sense of, you're here to work with other people to make the world a better place. Couple that with the fact that my family are truly educators in so many different ways. I think that insight, coupled with my family's DNA as educators, is the reason why I do what I do. And it's a different kind of teaching than being in a classroom or teaching at a university, but for whatever reason, I'm compelled to help people achieve what they want to achieve. Very much like you with the Black Dollar Fund, man. It's about fulfilling your purpose, but it's all rooted in serving other people and helping them get to the place where they fulfill and why they're here.
Definitely. I feel the same way. Ever since I was a kid, one of the things that happened to me is like I've always been like a business person. As a little kid, I used to go to we were poor. My mom, single mom, 3 kids, and she always worked, so I was a latchkey kid. So I wanted to help pay bills. So she's like, oh, you're just you're like 8 years old. What are you gonna do? And my uncle, who's now gone, used to always come and give us an allowance of like $5. And I kept mine. My sister and my brother were teens pretty much, so they were like always buying whatever they could buy when they got their money. So I kept my money and I saved it. And then I would go to the store. It has this idea if I can be able to sell candy at school. So back then, I'm being older. I mean, I'm dating myself. There was penny candy, and so we would go to the record store and actually buy penny candy. I spend, it was like a penny, so I would buy $5 worth, and it was big, this huge bag, and go to school and sell it for like a dime or a nickel or a quarter as it started to, get bigger and bigger. And I would just make money, man, and give it to my mom. She's like, "What are you doing?" Here it is at 8 years old. I thought of that because it's just like I always had that kind of heart where I needed to help. In this point, it was my mom, but in life, it has always been, a word here, my last dime there, whatever. And it was just because I felt good when other people felt good. It never really felt good to be around people who were sadder than you were. It's like, wow, life could be better. So that's good. That's good to hear. Now, here's the thing. George Floyd happened. Of course, we all mourned and had our own epiphanies, and that's where Black Dollar Fund and Black Brilliance came about. Throughout that, with you, there's a thing called 1 Million Truths that came about during that time. Now, if you want to share with us what that is, and everyone is 1milliontruths.com, you can go check it out. People of color, it's something amazing. This is what this man is great about, is being able to tap into himself and figure out what makes him. And then from there, the things that grow, it's like he plants the seed into himself, and then what grows out of it, he shares with others. I mean, if you're a manly man and you don't think you're gonna cry, watch this, and I guarantee you, your manhood would drop to zero. You would become feminine in a heartbeat. And it's okay to tap into that feminine side. It's okay. All right. Let's hear from Mark about 1 Million Truths.
The first time I was called a nigger, I was 8 years old. I happened to be on a soccer field and retrieving a ball that had kind of gone off. I was retrieving it for a little girl who was on the pitch. I wasn't even doing anything. I wasn't even messing with her. I just ran to help get the ball and help her out. And she called me a nigger just for that. I can't even count the number of experiences of being out with my childhood white friends only to hear them say, "Oh, look at those niggers over there," as if I was invisible, as if I wasn't even there. I could talk about the fear and the desperation I felt when I was accused of abducting a young lady. I could tell you about the horror of being ambushed by a group of Nazis while attending a party as a teenager. I could share in vivid detail the experience of being in a business meeting with my business partner and having them make off-color jokes and the pain that I felt. It's not about one experience. It is about the constant, consistent experience of having to deal with racism and having to constantly weave in and out of it and around it because it's everywhere and it's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. The world is changing in a way where we're going to be dealing with climate-related events. We have economic disparity to deal with, including social justice. But we don't have any more time for this nonsense. The way we're living, the way we're relating to each other, how we're treating each other is not sustainable. And so we need to do this work now so we are prepared for what's coming at us. Together, we can absolutely create a better future.
Thank you for that. True, that means a lot. And let's not forget to mention that your truth is also on the platform, so folk can,
Yes,
take your truth in and witness it, bear witness to it, and be with it and reflect on it, because you were preaching.
Yeah.
You were preaching. It probably makes sense to give a little background for 1 Million Truths. Like, how does an idea, a concept like that just suddenly appear Well, there was several things that happened, including, in addition to my lifetime of being a black man in America. 2016, Trump gets elected, and almost overnight, I find myself being chased in my neighborhood. People are driving by me during my 6 a.m. morning walks, yelling, "Hey, Negro, you don't belong here. You need to get out of this neighborhood." Multiple occasions, I would be pulled over in my car, just taking a call, like not having my earbuds. And so I would pull over, take the call so I wouldn't get a ticket or get in an accident. And inevitably, law enforcement would roll up. Officers were always polite and respectful, but they would say, "We've received multiple calls about your presence here." There were multiple times where I'd be driving, in the neighborhood, and the private security company personnel would be following me, or they would approach me because I was pulled over, and they would say, "We've gotten calls." Here's a tragic thing. I mean, that's all tragic and it's ridiculous, but it becomes a little worse given that I was only 3 or 4 blocks away from my home each time that happened. And the fact that it was happening in my neighborhood caught my attention. And so I reached out to a bunch of my black friends and people of color that I know. And I'm like, "Are you experiencing this?" And the answer was yes. But their yeses were 10 times worse than what I was dealing with. The worst case that I heard about was, crosses being burned on people's front lawns. So that stuck with me. Fast forward to 2020, Martin Luther King's holiday. Praise the man, we celebrated yesterday. It's 2021, celebrated yesterday. Woke up that morning, felt compelled to put pen to paper. What came out ended up being a Facebook post that went viral. The Facebook post had 2 parts to it. The first part was just an acknowledgement of the civil rights leaders from the 50s and 60s and thanking them for doing the work and making the sacrifices that made that enables me to be a CEO and a partner in a global corporation and doing the work I'm doing. The other part of that post was me sharing my experience with racism, beginning from the first encounter with it, all the way to being chased in my neighborhood under the Trump administration umbrella. Now, it wasn't the fact that it went viral that caught my attention. I mean, that was cool, that feels good. But it was the dozens and dozens of what became hundreds and hundreds of comments that were basically shocks, awe, gaffes, disbelief on the part of people in my life who are not Black. It was their shock and surprise, people I grew up with, the people I've worked with for decades, that really hit me hard, knocked me off my feet. And I was left saying, how is it that these people who are so close to me and so important in my life, how is it that they are surprised by my experience as a Black man in America? And so my conclusion was that we had a bigger problem than I was even aware of. Now, fast forward through the succession of murders, culminating in what happened to Mr. Floyd. It's day 2 of the protest. I wake up in the middle of the night and 1 million truths is seared in my mind. All I knew is that I was being called by God, your God, somebody else's God, universe, whatever that force is, I was being called by it to invite Black America to share their truth and to create a platform and a safe space for folk to be heard, affirmed rather than invalidated or challenged. And so the first call I made was to a co-founder of Common, Alex Bogusky. He's considered the Steve Jobs of advertising. I ran the idea by him, and he was just like, "That's a great idea." And so we started shaping it together. The second call I made was to Wesley Terhar of Media Monks. Media Monks is the world's largest production company. And I said, "Wesley, here's an idea we're working on. Can you help me?" And he said yes, and he threw the entire weight of that organization behind the project, and the rest is history. So what is it? It's a multimedia platform that's dedicated to truth and reconciliation, that's underpinned by the personal stories or truths as we refer to them by Black America and from Black America. The goal is to create a tapestry of stories, truths that demonstrate racism in the fabric of everyday American life. And so on the platform, you'll hear from celebrities, of course, but you'll also hear from men and women, young and old, in towns that you've never heard of and you'll probably never go to in your lifetime throughout America. So it's intended to be an archive that future generations will look back at, hopefully in 10, 20 years and go, what was going on then? That's insane. Thank God it's not the same now. And it's the goal, we're shooting high. I mean, it's 1 million truths. We want to get to 10 million, 20 million truths. Ultimately, we want to help people get back into relationship with each other, and for both Blacks and whites to have an opportunity to do the internal work that they need so we can actually go after some of these big problems like climate change and injustice and, financial disparity. Like, I really think that, well, it's obvious after January 6th that racism has caught up with us. Like, it's like, are we going to willingly incur more costs because of this nasty, disgusting phenomena in our country and the way we treat each other, the way Black people are treated? Are we willing to incur more costs? Like, have we hit the bottom yet, or are we still willing to go farther down by hanging on to this phenomena that has a grasp on all of us? There you go.
Exactly. That's awesome. It's true. After the 6th, man, I mean, if people didn't understand that racism had a stronghold on America, then, and the thing that really kind of gets me with that is that, people will say, especially his supporters, I support him, but, I'm not racist. And I'm like, okay, I hear you, but what separates you from the racist? You know what I mean? If you're not the racist but you believe like racist, then what separates you from them? Because obviously it wasn't the value system, because you allowed the values to deteriorate. So that wasn't it. So was it money? Was it power? Was it just the abortions? I mean, there were so many different things that kind of like that I struggle with trying to figure out. I have friends of all types, and I just couldn't understand how they didn't see it. And I just thought they just willfully just wanted to say they didn't see it, but they saw it, but they just didn't want to take responsibility for what they saw. So they just kind of like put on blinders and said, it's not happening. And I'm like, it's happening. And then, the 6th came and I'm like, see, it happened. A lot of people just don't pay attention. They don't heed the warning, Also, the thing, as far as like Martin Luther King, it's always like a Black history. And that's the reason why I delved into Black Brilliance on the B-side, because I didn't know my history as much as I should have. And a lot of reasons because I wanted to shut off the negative stuff that happened to us. And I'm like, man, I keep on thinking about that. It takes me away from what is life like for people who don't have these issues of the past, you know what I mean? And I was like, man, and then I started who don't have opportunities, or who do have opportunities and didn't, go through what we went through. And then I started to really hone in on the brilliant people. And one of the brilliant things that, I'm always learning more about Martin Luther King, man. And I try to learn something different. But I didn't even know he had this quote, and it really kind of suits. I just found it last night. And I think I heard it like from Don Lemon or something like that. And I looked it up and I'm like, man, I didn't know that was his quote. And it's, we need leaders not in love with money, but in love with justice. Not in love with publicity, but in love with humanity. I didn't know Martin Luther King had said that. I knew only like the A side, the hit records that he said. I have a dream. I didn't know, the B side of what he was saying, some of the things that he had said. And that is like everything that I stand for, in love with, not with money, but in love with justice. And, being able to do things for people because it's a humane thing to do, not because you're going to benefit out of it like financially or anything else. It's just humane. You don't have to be popular, just be a good person. And that's one of the things that I just read about. Did you know he said that quote? Did you hear it before?
Yes, I am aware of it. I think many of us aren't aware of the fact that at the base of everything he was doing was a very deep, profound love for human beings, and a belief that love ultimately could bring people together. Unfortunately, there was enough folks in power, in position, to prevent that love from being really felt and heard.
Yeah, it would be profound if what he did took a hold while he was alive, then how would the world be? It's amazing how even someone like the people that I just saw, some of the Republican people that were against the voting and stuff like that, they put out posts all over the place. Martin Luther King quotes, Martin Luther King quotes. I'm like, you don't believe in these quotes. I'm like, you're just putting it out there for publicity. It's not for humanity. It's for publicity. You want people to think that you care about Black people in that sense.
What it was, this is me being a little snarky, but it's kind of like, oh, it's on our content publishing, our social media calendar. It says it's Martin Luther King Day. Get a picture and throw up a couple of words, and bang, check that box. What's tomorrow? That's what that was.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is, dude. I guarantee you, the stuff they put out, you ask them the next day or ask them the same day. So what was that quote you put out today? They haven't a clue. They have to look it up. I think it's their aides that do it.
Drew, can I stay on this just this point of love, because it is truly who you are. Yeah. It's just who you are, and I've never met anybody who is so unafraid of putting that out in the world. I mean, you're extraordinary in that sense. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I want people to really understand that that's who you are fundamentally. And it exudes through everything you do. I mean, that's one of the reasons why you're so loved in the common communities, because that's how you show up for all of us. Like you're there for us more than we are there for ourselves in some ways.
Oh man, thank you. I appreciate that. See, told you, he'll make you cry, dude. He'll make you cry. No, but I appreciate it, man. I appreciate that. It's just, I don't see any other way. I mean, I look at people who do things, just for themselves and don't think about other people. I don't look down on them. I just feel bad sometimes. It's like, it's hard. It's hard. I think that life is harder than what I'm doing, The self-satisfaction as well as seeing another person smile. It's like it's a win-win in every instance. But even when I was younger, like one of the things that I realized is that, because growing up poor and stuff like that, I would always, I'd be driving in what we call a bucket. I was driving in this ugly car that was messed up, this hoopty, and somebody would pull up younger than me with a better car, and I would be like, man, how did they get that? What did they do? And I always would try and seek to be, whatever that person is. It's I can try and get ahead. So I was thinking about economics because I grew up poor. And I would always sometimes have this silent little hate for that person. I'm like, they probably doing drugs. I would think this negative stuff. And then that was like in the early 20s. And then at the same time, I said probably about 25, somewhere around there, I realized I needed to be happy for that person, because no matter what, somebody at some time bust their butt to get where they are. And, that's when I started realizing, okay, I can be happy for them and be happy for myself at the same time. It wasn't like my happiness for somebody else took away from my own happiness. It's like raising two people up at the same time is not a negative. And that's what I did a research years ago, where I saw just the human nature of things, where people would fall in love with putting people down. Like if you really look at how people react when they're doing something good, and then you look at them behind the glass, don't listen to the audio, when they're talking about somebody and doing something negative, like they're out there talking about somebody at work, or their parents are like, oh, this dude, this and that. They could be literally talking. If you look out from the outside, not hearing it, it looks like they're having a party and it's a positive thing going on. But you open the door, they're talking about people's mothers, they're talking about this person's fat, they're talking about, and the difference is that they feed off of the negative so much that it looks like it's a positive thing from the outside looking in. And I was like, man, you guys, and I realized that one time at work, and I was like, do you guys realize you're finding happiness in negativity? The more you can down somebody, the better you feel. How about if you gave them love and felt that exact same way, instead of feeling like, oh, they have something that I don't have? Give them credit when they need it, when they deserve it. and see how you feel when if you feel bad about that, then you need to go home and focus on why you feel bad about doing good for others. And some people listen, other people are like, you don't know what you're talking about, because they really fall in love with negativity. They really fall in love with it, and it makes them feel good because they can't find that positiveness within themselves, that introspect, that being able to see inside that I am all I can be and I can do better every day, as opposed to that person's better than me, so I got to down him or her so that I can feel good. That's what we see when we have celebrities and we're always trying to tear them down, is because they don't see the hard work it took them to get there. They just see that they're there and I'm not. So I got to tear them down. Every little thing they do wrong, let me tear them down so I can feel better, instead of just taking that in and trying to make yourself better. But
That's me preaching again. But anyway, so
Good stuff,
that's what
man.
it's like for me.
It's good.
I look
That's
at
good.
it. Yeah.
I will drink in
What
every
was-
word, man. Keep it flowing.
I always want to ask somebody this. I never really ask this question to people. What advice would you give your younger self?
I'll say it this way. I'll speak from the future looking back. I would say to myself, you're eventually going to make a choice to trust yourself, fundamentally trust yourself. That will be the thing that saves you. Make that choice.
Make that choice. Trust yourself. Wow, that's good, man. That's really good. So what advice would you give your daughters, in a sense, like, I knew that growing up, I would say to myself, like I would say to my kids, you can do anything, especially my daughter, my son, I told him that as well. But I knew society, because I looked upon how society would look at my kids. And I would tell them things that I don't think they kind of understood, because, they grew up around a white mother, so they didn't know the struggle that they were going to have just by the world looking at them, not the way their mother and their uncle and their aunts and stuff look at them, because those white people aren't regular white people. You know what I'm saying? It's a society. Or even just the fact of even, people of color, how we see each other sometimes. So to prepare them for the lives that they're gonna have, I would tell my kids, it's like, life is not gonna be always that easy, and there are gonna be some things that are gonna happen. And I didn't want to be like Debbie Downer, but I just wanted to let them know, be prepared for society. I love you, this and the other, but I would give them specific things like, always believe in yourself 100%, no matter what anybody says about you. You feel, what you feel about yourself is more important, and what you feel about family and how you guys, that's more important than anything. So don't let society determine who you become. Let yourself and your perspective of yourself propel you to who you're supposed to be. So those types of things, I always try to give them an insight. Is there anything that you give your kids, or are they too young to be given into it right now, but give them to kind of like thrust them into a world without actually telling them what that world is, but giving them the tools to get out into that world?
Yeah. So they're still a little too young to fully grasp it. And my wife and I have made a choice to not make race an issue, but to look for the moment where they're at a place in their life where it will become one. So give them time and space just to enjoy being kids and human beings in the form of kids, but also be preemptive, be proactive and get out in front of that moment where that switch is going to get flipped fully on. So there's two parts to my answer to this question. There's the black part, and then there's what I think any child or young person is going to have to be prepared for. So on the black side of the answer, it is the world is going to put you in the black category, and you need to be ready for that, and you need to understand what that means. And hopefully, by the time that you get to that moment, things will be different. So you won't experience the things that I've experienced, like being ambushed by Nazis and, being accused of abducting a woman and all that kind of stuff. So there's that. I'm praying to God that they won't have to deal with that kind of viciousness. But I think that personal practice, spiritual practice, faith, tending to one's internal terrain is important. So certainly talking about that, talking about my commitment to being a Zen priest and the thousands of hours that I spent in meditation and all of the training around character, all that stuff is important. So we are talking about that. Certainly it's important to be in relationship with other Black folk, you know. So let's make sure that continues to happen. But the other part that in some ways makes me even sadder to have this kind of conversation with my kids has to do with the world that they are inheriting. And, Drew, that several people in the common community are experts in the world of climate change, and they have real firsthand knowledge through peer research and, battle-tested information about the dynamics that are in play. And one day I asked Alex Diaz, who's in Puerto Rico, to just shoot straight. So it's like, okay, Alex, what are we dealing with? I mean, I'm already fairly knowledgeable. I'm Jane-just in a room, but like, what are my kids going to be faced with? And I asked him this question. I said, are they going to make it based on the effects of climate change and other related dynamics to that? And he says, I don't know, probably not. Something is going to catch up with them. And I wept.
Wow.
I wept.
Wow.
And for the next hour, Alex explained all of the preparation that's needed to be resilient enough to respond to this wave of effects that are going to become more and more present and accelerated, from bacterias that go airborne, emerge from the ocean and go airborne, to we're seeing, you're in California, Los Angeles, the massive fires that we've been having in California. That's just going to continue to happen. But the ripple effects, from increase in temperature, climate temperature, to the dislocation that's going to happen because certain parts of the earth are not going to be habitable, and the industry collapses, and the currency collapses that are going to go with that. And our children are going to have the skill to be able to move. So, if you just think about the implications of that to like home ownership, like our future generation is going to be investing in home ownership, or are they going to be in rental agreements, or are they going to be doing Airbnb and moving constantly? I'm being a little dramatic here. Part of this because I want to wake folk up. Hopefully I'm half right or half wrong. But that's the future that I want to prepare my girls for. I want them to know what we of humanity have set off, in addition to race and racism. And I want them to have the skills to be able to adapt.
Definitely. Now, one of the things that I thought about while you were saying that was that society always, we make everything dramatic until it actually happens. I mean, people say it's dramatic, and then it happens. And if you have any proof that, like scientists and, people who deal with the brain, stuff like that, they don't know what they're talking about. It was said so many times to people. This is, I see the disconnect, the cognitive dissonance that we had with people, is that you see this whole thing about what happened with Trump. And people said way back in 2015 where this could lead toward our democracy if these things continue to move forward the way that they were going. And people are like, nah, you're being dramatic. And within 4 years, that happened. We actually had them try to overturn our democracy. So to think that, these same people who kept denying that, keep denying all these things that are happening to our world, to our earth. Keep denying it. We should learn something, even if it's just about our humanity, is that we keep denying things until they happen. It's going to be too late to do something once we see it. It's all about listening to the scientists who know what the heck they're talking about, and being, proactive in a situation of being able to do it way before it actually happens. We see it happening right now. We all should get on board on trying to change it. But I think a lot of people get caught up is in the now. they get caught up in the now because it's like, now I can't pay my bills, now I can't do this, and now I can't do that, and they get caught up in the it's hard to say, but the arrogance in believing that nothing is going to happen to you. We're too good for it to happen to, or America is like this or that, and I think we get caught up in our heads too much, thinking that we're better than something, that we don't realize what we're getting ourselves into. Just take some introspect and pay attention to what we're doing, and we can change stuff and move it around and leave it for a better world for our future. I think that the idea of now is what we've become. Everything is now. We want to lose weight now. We want to do this now. We want to do that now. And it's like, find some kind of passion toward doing something for the future. Like when that song is, I believe the children are our future. And it's like, we could think about our kids, but for some reason, at some point, we moved away from leaving our kids a better world. At some point, we started to think that everything's going to stay the same that it is today. And when people tell us, hey, red light, the shit's changing, and people are still like, that's so far away. I'm like, yeah, you'll be dead, but your kids and grandkids, those are the ones that you're leaving this crap to, because the power right now, I want this car, I want this, that's killing our society. Yeah, but it's amazing how I look back and just look at the human condition, like how a lot of people just don't look inwardly and try to realize that maybe I am doing something wrong. I don't think they want to admit that they're wrong. Thank you, man. I appreciate you for coming onto the show, being the first. This whole thing about Black Brilliance, we've all learned that just being the best that you can be, working hard, and actually doing things for others is a major key to finding out who you are and how you fit within society. So we want to let you guys know again that we talked about Bessie Blount Griffin. She is a brilliant person of the past, and we just talked about Mark Hamilton Eckhardt.
Oh, wow. You threw in the middle name there, man. Look at you.
Exactly. The brilliance.
The brilliance of the future. Check him out. 1milliontruths.com. And also on common.is. Entrepreneurs out there, if you're doing things for people, social entrepreneur, social impact stuff, check him out on common.is. Mark Eckhardt, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being on the show, man. I appreciate you. And have a good day, man. Be safe.
Oh, thanks, Drew. Honor and a privilege. I'm proud of you, inspired by you, and I'm just very grateful that you're in my life. We missed the opportunity to do our annual holiday skating excursion.
Definitely.
But next year, I'm going to make sure that I'm in town so we can do that.
Definitely, man.